When you look at what was happening with Colt when I got here in 2015, we had a broad line, relatively broad line, and most of them were built against what we would call today a more traditional looking 1911. We really didn't have a lot of products for today's 1911 shooter, competitive shooter. And so one of the goals that we had early on was, how can we bridge this tradition and then bring it into a shooter that would want to shoot our gun for today's shooter? And so for me, the most important stride forward for us was the competition pistol.
We looked back just a few years at the M45, and what we realized real quickly was the M45's adoption by the Marine Corps in 2012 really gave us an opportunity to take a 1911 and figure out what features made sense now.
That pistol was incredibly accurate. Ergonomically, we did an undercut trigger guard and we relieved the trigger guard so you can get higher on the pistol and more leverage on the gun. It also had an upswept and appropriate beavertail for today's shooter. We extended the thumb safety. We used serrations from the Marine Corps pistol. Again, we took a lot of cues from the Marine Corps pistol because there was a lot of learnings that happened. When we did that gun with the Marine Corps, we also had a dual spring mechanism, which incredibly improved the ability to have spring life, where, you know, back then, if you shot 4,000 rounds through a single spring, you were changing them out. And for people that shoot a lot, you're changing them out every month and a half. These dual recoil springs, the Marines were giving us feedback that they were getting close to 15,000 or more rounds through them, and they were shooting really hard, heavy round ball plus P ammunition through them. So we knew we had to incorporate that somehow.
While that product lived sort of standalone for some period of time, what we quickly discovered was if we took the dual spring recoil system from that, for instance, the wide serrations, you take that upswept beavertail and use that across the line. Take G10 grips and use those across the line. And we started walking through each area of the 1911 lineup and taking those things and applying to it. And again, I say it started with the competition pistol because we didn't really have anything in our lineup that was perfect for somebody who was gonna go shoot IDPA, on Saturday. And this was the gun where they could walk in, they could pick it up on a Friday night and be ready to shoot on Saturday and be competitive with it.
It was a special model for us to go after, and obviously it had a legendary barrel. It's another thing we did though, is we took that Gold Cup National Match barrel that for years had done well at Camp Perry and other places and had this wonderful reputation. And we put that in nearly every pistol, and now every pistol in our 1911 line, which adds a lot of value to that consumer.
Colt has a great relationship with law enforcement and military ever since it began. This is the latest version of a gun that was designed and built specifically for operators. With the help of Daryl Holland, who is on our pro staff, we built the gun that had the features that he looked for when he was in the military. Let me just explain to you what makes this gun so special. We take a stainless steel gun, we put black iron bond on it. That's another corrosion-proof finish, making it matte black. We checker the front strap 25 lines per inch, the mainspring housing with a mag well. We put an ambi safety on it so that if you gotta shoot support hand or strong hand, you can operate the safety easily. Front and rear cocking serrations, has a Novak fixed rear sight with a night sight in the front, which is probably the best setup for low light shooting that we have today, and a national match barrel, and the dual recoil system that we pioneered with the Marine Corps in order to have these guns run better, and the spring life is twice what they used to be. So this gun here, if you're an operator or you're just a guy that's a gun enthusiast that likes a gun that they can have for personal protection, this is the gun that you want to buy.
When you talk to gun builders, some of the biggest and brightest names in our industry, Pete Siggles or Jason Burtons or, Stan Chen's, their love of Colt guns is special. There's many people out there that talk about, the value of a gun or the strength of the steel. But many of those gun builders, they like nothing better, Wayne Novak, they like nothing better than to get their hands on Colt steel and be able to work on a Colt 1911. I like the fact that very few companies, really of any companies, can do that the way we can. That we build a different gun using US forged steel. They're stronger, they hold up, they're very accurate guns right out of the box. And to have that reputation of quality in our industry is something special. And not everybody has that. Not everybody has that platform to build from.
The reason that this model number is called the 1911 C is because the C is for classic. If I took the name John Browning and Colt and put them together, the first thing that should come to mind is the 1911. This gun, the way it is and the feature set on it, is almost the same as it was back in 1911. There are a couple changes that the military did over the years. We just did a couple scallops here. We put a little higher visibility sights on it to make it more user-friendly because, let's face it, if I buy one today, I want to use it. The great thing about this gun is blued steel, and it's made from forgings, no cast in it at all, forged frame, forged slide, walnut double diamond stocks. When you see this gun, there is no doubt in your mind that you're looking at a Colt 1911. This gun, as I said before, is as relevant today as it was in 1911.
So it's really fun walking through the 1911 process at Colt. It's really simple. It starts with a forging. It starts with a crate of raw U.S. steel. And and the first thing you have to do when you have those forgings, those frame forgings and those slide forgings is, you have to true them up. They go onto a machine, they get essentially flattened to two parallel surfaces. Forgings, of course, there's a lot of variation in a forging. And you can't really start machining a forging until you create two surfaces that are true. And so that's the first place they all go. And then after that, they go into the machining lines and we start cutting frames into frames and we start cutting slides into slides. And over time, through the process, it starts looking more and more like a real slide and a real frame. And it's sort of fun to walk through that process and see it piece by piece. And the 1911 in particular, I mean, there is a level of craftsmanship within the process that's really a result of, it's a 100-year-old product. And you have kind of spaces in between the machinery where things need to be hand deburred, and you'll have a guy out there taking a freshly machined part off of a CNC machine, and he'll just be running a file over some edges trying to deburr things before it goes to the next step in the process. So even though a lot of the final finishing might be done by a polisher sitting at a polishing workstation or a tumbler that a part might go into, within the process there's still a lot of hand filing, there's still a lot of sort of individual somebody looking at a part and really kind of giving it their touch of craftsmanship.
The Gold Cup's interesting. It's more personal for me. I had a Gold Cup that I had purchased. One of my first firearms, I purchased it down in Midlothian, Virginia, and bought this Gold Cup. I loved it, but I knew as a shooter, if I was going to take it to matches, I needed to put some special treatments to it. So I brought that idea to our team and said, can we take our current Gold Cup trophy and bring it into a 70 series platform, have it have a mag funnel, checker the gun, bring some of these key features, undercut the trigger guard, and do some of the key features and give it to shooters like Mark and the Williams sisters so that they can win national titles with it. And so they brought back the gun, and effectively is my gun on steroids. It's a better gun than my gun in a lot of ways. And we priced it at around $1,700, and that's a tremendous value when you consider what's out there in terms of competitive guns in that kind of more custom space. The Gold Cup is a tremendous value to our consumer. We did it in not only 45, but we did it in 9mm and 38 Super. I think when you look at Colt and how we redesigned these pistols, starting in 2016, I can make an argument that the competition is the best single stack competitive gun in and around that $900 to $1,000 price point in the industry. I could make that same argument when I look at night sights, the reliability of a Defender, the serration changes we made, the dual spring operation of our Defender. Again, at that $1,000 for a defensive 1911 handgun, I could make an argument that that is the most valuable part and piece of our line. Again, like I talked about earlier with the Gold Cup, I could make that same argument around a Gold Cup trophy being a really important step. So when you think about that, our lineup, although it's not maybe as broad as it was back in 2015 in terms of pure SKU count, we're covering way more bases and we're addressing more shooters' needs today than we ever have. So for me, you could probably make that value story almost of every firearm in our line, and I'm really proud of that.